Ted, thank you. A candid conversation with the jury foreperson in the Robert Tullis murder trial. You're watching 8 News Now at 6. I'm Brian Loftus.
And I'm Denise Valdez. Tullis, of course, convicted on Wednesday in the 2022 stabbing of investigative reporter Jeff Gehrman. 8 News Now investigator Kyle Payne spoke with that juror, who tells us he gave Tullis every chance he could, but in the end says there was simply too much evidence against him.
The jury foreperson and I spoke for over a half hour. He was unsure of whether to convict Tullis until he heard Tullis on the stand, telling the jury about the vast conspiracy against him and the hitman who Tullis says killed Jeff Gehrman.
That's why when I went back there, I was a strong guilty at the beginning. I just couldn't find the piece of evidence that he wanted us to find.
Finding Robert Tullis guilty took foreman Gregory Whitney and the 11 other jurors the better part of 3 days of deliberating to get to this moment.
Guilty of first-degree murder with use of a deadly weapon.
But Tullis told 8 News Now investigator Vanessa Murphy that the jury got it wrong.
I get where he's coming from. He really thought he could prove his innocence. He really wanted to tell his story. He thought he told it well enough, but
in 3 days on the witness stand, pleading his case to the jury,
I'm not the kind of person who could brutally murder another man.
Whitney says Tullis said so many things, he began to undermine his own story, which the longer it went on, began to fall apart. And the more they heard, the less they believed. Even so, they scoured over more than 400 pieces of evidence and testimony from 30 witnesses or so, trying to make sure they got it right.
And we really wanted to just let everyone know that we really did look over everything from point A to point B, and we wanted to get him his best shot. I personally knew nothing about the guy, so I didn't have any bias. I started reading all the comments afterwards, and I was like, people were wondering, what took us so long?
What took so long, in part, is that certain jurors needed convincing that enough of the evidence pointed to Tullis, and that the jury could disprove Tullis's claims that the police and his political enemies, among others, conspired to kill Gehrman to get rid of Tullis, even saying he wouldn't be foolish enough to drive his own car to the scene of the crime, which police, who gathered 5 miles of video evidence of Tullis's dark red SUV around the time of the murder, said is exactly what happened.
Tullis's vehicle was the one used in the commission of Jeffrey Gehrman's murder.
And it's moments and mistakes like that, Whitney says, when others who were at one point undecided, decided, including one juror in particular.
When she did switch over, she's just like, she's like, the main reason I switched over, or I didn't want to switch to guilty, is she just couldn't believe somebody could be that dumb and making so many little mistakes. And it's just like, well, how?
How and why are questions this jury didn't have to answer and will likely never be answered.
It sticks with you, it really does. There's when I was looking through a lot of those evidence photos, I saw stuff that will stay with me because it's not a normal case. It was really one of those cases where you don't believe that could be a real story.
This is the second juror I've interviewed since the verdict on Wednesday. They both said Tullis's own testimony sank him, and neither of them were able to get over the police finding Tullis's DNA under Gehrman's fingernails. For them, it seems that was as good as a smoking gun. In the studio, I'm Kyle Payne, 8 News Now.